Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. It's a beautiful Monday morning, September 25th, 2023. We get together with our distribution partners most weekday mornings at this time to talk about strategies, tips, techniques, share success stories, and support each of you. We have one primary topic we'll go through, but we have a number of smaller items or topics or issues that have come up that we want to address kind of from a housekeeping perspective right afterwards. So hang in with us if you don't mind. We'll go through this brief conversation and then we'll open it up for a number of other topics that some of you have asked us to address today, which is great. That's why we're here. So today again is September 25th. We're going to talk about the Access to Capital program. I've been hesitant to bring this up just simply because the Access to Capital program it's not a resource offered through the branches. Is it a resource? Yes. Is it something that we've done for years with success? Yes, but it's not a branch program. So I'm not here to confuse you to say, oh, here's something new that branches do. In fact, branches can't do this for a specific reason that I'll identify in a minute, but that doesn't mean that it's not needed. And so we'll talk about some workarounds in just a moment. So the Access to Capital program is it's different than credit and funding, is a grant subsidized resource to assist entrepreneurs. It's focused on their business, on positioning their business for funding. So think about the startup program. We talk about that. And the startup program is a resource of your branch that is available, the Startup Business Funding Program. The Access to Capital program is different. It is similar to the startup to the extent that we're working on positioning businesses for a successful capital raise. But it's not the same as the startup. The startup program includes us providing an address. There is no address provided with Access to Capital. The startup program includes us filing with the Secretary of State to get a brand new entity created. The Access to Capital doesn't include that. So just be clear on those differences. If we were to identify the four primary bullet points, Access to Capital has no upfront cost. So it's different than the other two, isn't it? Credit and funding, when they enroll through your branch, they're paying you either the full refundable setup fee or at least the $250 down payment, aren't they? So there is an upfront cost for credit and funding through your branch. The startup program, which isn't our focus today, does have an upfront cost. So those programs both do have an upfront cost, but Access to Capital does not. It does not have an upfront cost. Does that mean it's free? No. Didn't say it was free. It's not free. But the deposit that clients pay for Access to Capital is paid after they receive their first tranche of funding. So you see the difference there. Of course, there's no minimum credit scores or time in business to enroll in Access to Capital. Now, this is specifically set up to be a 28-day curriculum. And I'll describe that so you know what that exactly means in a minute. But it's not instant. It's not overnight. It's a 28-day process. Now, we'll help clients that are in Access to Capital see what they qualify for right away, that concept of a first tranche of financing, which you've heard us use before. But it is a 28-day process. People like to rush it. People like to hurry it. But the truth is, it's a 28-day process. Now, so this is a resource that can be used with your credit and funding clients, but we need to talk a little bit more about that as we continue, because it's not a branch program. So let's get to the note here, which explains why that is. So the note is, the Access to Capital is not a program offered directly by branches. And you might say, well, why not? I mean, if it's good, it helps people, it's needed, why not? Because it's not private labeled, right? So when you're going out to the marketplace with credit and funding, you're going out under your contract, under your branding, under your pricing, your terms and conditions. It's you, and we're just merely the vendor in the background. And that works for credit and funding. That does not work for access to capital. So that's why we've not put this in under the branch, because as you'll see as we go through the curriculum, that 28-day curriculum, it is not private label. We do encourage you to consider yourself going through the curriculum through kind of a train the trainer. So go through it yourself, understand what we're teaching, and see how we might be able to collaborate with you on your clients. So with that being said, let's go ahead and go through the curriculum so you understand when I use that term what it means. So there is a certification. Now, this is not the certification that our distribution partners go through. So this has nothing to do with being an agent, a representative, a branch, a referral partner, nothing. This is solely based upon from the client's perspective. So different, right? Now, this is an award-winning 4-module curriculum, and we're going to go through the modules so you understand them. What we're focused on is providing participants with a practical knowledge of how to get a business prepared for funding and success. So back when I worked at the SBA, and I know a number of you have either worked with SCORE or at the SBA, this is the curriculum that we taught through the SBA. So it's very good. Now, we taught these usually one evening a week, Tuesday evenings over 4 consecutive weeks. With the advent of Zoom and social distancing and everything else, distance-based learning, now we offer it online, but it used to be only available in person. Each participant that goes through this, they're assigned a mentor, they receive materials, and again, 28 days. So there's 4 modules. They allow 7 days per module. So that's why you might say, well, why is it 28 days? Why is it not 30? Why was 28? Because there's 4 modules, 7 days per module. 7 times 4 is 28. What I don't want you to make the mistake of is to look at this and say, oh, this is just some class. This is just some curriculum. Because if you see it that way, you're missing the entire point. So this is a very effective and proven process whereby it's a 2-step process. First, we teach the participant a concept which is valuable and important, but most importantly, then we help them apply that knowledge to their business. So we learn and then we do. We learn and then we do. We learn and then we do. And we do that 4 times, of course, on each topic. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's go ahead and introduce what the 4 modules are so you understand them. And again, if you wanted to go through them, you could as well. Not trying to persuade you to, but this is the underpinning. The knowledge is going to be useful for you at the branch level, because we believe this is the guidebook of how to get businesses ready for funding. But you can take this knowledge and run it through your branch without running clients through access to capital, I guess, is the point. All right, so our first module is on business plans, but really that's a poor title. It's really about business planning. So a business plan is actually the 3rd step in business planning. I don't know if you knew that or not. So usually the first step of a business planning process is an idea. We call that the back of the napkin plan. You know, infamously, or I guess famously, Southwest Airlines, the concept came up as 2 men were, I think, in a bar and sketched out a little diagram on the back of a napkin. But the first stage of business planning is just when you have some idea. You've not vetted it yet. You've not really thought through all the pros and cons. You haven't decided what it's going to cost to implement, just an idea. So that's the first of the 4 steps of the business planning process. So you and I will see some clients that are in that very first step. The second step of the business planning process is called the resource plan. Okay, I've thought of something. Now I want to put together and I want to do it. So what would it cost to start the business? Not for ongoing operations, not for optimal growth and reaching our potential, but what's that list of things that I would need to be able to get my business started? That's the second step in a 4-step business planning process and called a resource plan. Now, of course, you and I work with some clients that are beyond that, right? They already have a business that's open, so they're not at the resource plan level. But conversely, we might be seeing clients that don't have a business that's operating yet, and that's really where they need to be. They're not yet ready for a full business plan. We need to put together the resource plan, just that itemized list of what do I need, what's it going to cost to get this business formed and started. Then the third phase of the business planning process is the traditional business plan that you might think about. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And then the fourth and ongoing phase of business planning is ongoing monitoring. Okay, how are we doing using SMART goals, specific, measurable, obtainable, realistic, and timely. So module 1, we teach the planning process, figure out where the client is in that process, and then execute that knowledge. So what's the knowledge? They learn about the 4 different stages of business planning. What's the application? In other words, what do we do with the client? Because this is not just a class where they learn. We're taking the knowledge and then we turn around and apply it. So what we do is we help them put together certainly a lender compliant business plan, and we provide the software, we pay for it. But it's often, even before we do this, if they're an early stage business, put together that resource plan. So business planning in a very practical and relevant way, with the outcome that they're going to have a lender compliant written business plan. Module 2 is on business credit, not personal credits, because you know, on credit and funding, we spend a lot of time working on personal credit. Credit sweep, which is a topic we're going to discuss here if we get through this, to make sure everyone's clear on that. Credit sweep is a free resource that everyone in credit funding gets, but that is on personal credit. Here we're talking about business credit. So the knowledge that the participants are going to learn is what business credit is, how it works, how it's different. And obviously, you're going to run into some clients that are looking for funding or credit or what have you, that's not personally guaranteed, no PG. Well, the only way to accomplish that is if we have strong business credit. So we learn about that and then we do it. We don't just talk about it, we actually do it. So in module 2, which is also week 2, because each of these is 1 week, we help each participant build out their business credit profile. So making sure that they look good through Dun & Bradstreet and Experian Business, helping them add trade lines, making sure they get to at least an 80 Paydex score through Dun & Bradstreet, at least an 80 IntelliScore score through Experian Business. And we make sure that they walk away with at least $10,000 of business credit during this process. Module 3 is financial management. Oh my goodness, I see a lot of need for this. So with module 3, we're teaching them about important financial management concepts. And sometimes some of these folks they don't even know what a balance sheet is, what's on it, how it differs from an income statement. There's some fundamental financial illiteracy that's happening with a lot of the small businesses that we work with. Well, module 3 does a great job of addressing that. So we teach and then we implement, we apply that knowledge to their business. And so what that means is we're going to actually help them put together the financial statements. So they have that for their loan package. So they have a lender compliant balance sheet. They have a lender compliant profit and loss, even if it's a brand new business. That takes us to module 4, which is called banking and money. More information on what lenders are looking for. And essentially, we're wrapping up everything so we have a good loan package for the client. So you can see with what you all are doing on the branch side, you're focused primarily on credit and funding. That's getting the business owner qualified for funding. What access to capital does is gets the business ready for funding. But again, you could go through this curriculum and you could extract as you wish, or we could find a way to actually run your branch clients through this if you want. It would not be private label, because this material was put together. It's award-winning, it's very good, but it's not private label. So that's why we don't put it under the branch, because you'd be disappointed because it's not all branded to you. Now, theoretically, could we reconstruct all of this and brand it to each of your branches? But you got to realize we have over 100 branches. You know how much time it would take to change everything and brand it to each of your branches? That would be a huge time commitment and frankly an expense that we don't want you to pay for. So next step. Obviously, if you have any of your clients that you feel like they need assistance with this material in getting their business ready for funding, then you can refer them to the Access to Capital program. If you yourself would like to go through the curriculum, you're more than welcome to. And we've made it very simple. Just if you go to the home page on guaranteedfunding.org, that's where you can get plugged in. So that's the introduction / explanation of access to capital. So let me just take a quick moment, ask questions on that before we get to our other topics that we have to discuss today that several of you have submitted. All right. So Lon's asking about the guarantee. Yeah. So anyone that goes through the Access to Capital program, it does include a $100,000 guarantee by going through the process. So I do realize that if they're in credit and funding as well, then frankly they're guaranteed $200,000. It's a cumulative guarantee because each program has its own guarantee. But it makes sense, right? If you and I can work together under your branch to get the client, the business owner credible, that's going to provide access to capital or to funding. And then if we can get the business qualified as well, that's going to give us even more access to funding. But we could do one or the other, of course. All right, so there's access to capital. Don't want it to be a distraction, but just some of you seem to have a longing to understand how it fit into the kind of the entrepreneurial ecosystem that you and I are involved with. All right, miscellaneous other items on credit and funding, which is your bread and butter. On credit and funding, the credit sweep program is included for free, but let's talk about the requirements for that. So first of all, you have to have a client enrolled in credit and funding to get the credit sweep for free. They must have paid the refundable setup fee in full before we launch or implement the credit sweep. Well, why is that? We have to pay the paralegal team to go draft these documents and do the work. And so we don't want to be upside down. So if you have clients that are making payments, hey, that's okay. But the credit sweep won't be available to them until they've paid the refundable setup fee in full, because otherwise we're upside down on that client. We don't want to lose money on every client. So requirement number one for the free credit sweep is that the client has paid the refundable setup fee in full. The second is there's a form that they fill out for that. And thus there's no cost because they're in credit and funding. We'll make sure you have an editable version of that Word document and you get so it is private label. So then the client signs that. That does have a spot on it where it asks for the client's credit monitoring login. The paralegals do require that clients use Smart Credit during the course of the credit sweep, just that 30 to 60 day process. So that specific credit monitoring Smart Credit is required by the paralegals. So both the client as well as the paralegal team are able to look and access and monitor credit. So that is a consideration. Not a big deal, but just everyone needs to know that. And then lastly, for us to implement, to execute the credit sweep, in addition to them having paid their setup fee in full to you, the branch, in addition to them having completed the form that we'll provide to you, let us know if you need it for the enrollment in the credit sweep, they need to provide their driver's license and a proof of address, which is typically a utility bill less than 30 days old. Now, they can use a passport instead of a driver's license, and if they don't have a utility bill, they could use a bank statement, but it's something that verifies for the credit bureaus that the person is who they say they are. So those are the things that are needed for credit sweep. We don't charge the client, we don't charge you for going through credit sweep if they're in the credit and funding program and they've paid the refundable setup fee in full. So there might have been some confusion or lack of clarity on that, so I wanted to address that. Ken says, if the client's in credit and funding but on a payment plan, can they pay it sooner? Well, sure. There's no prepayment penalties, and we're able to work with them in other aspects of the credit and funding program other than credit sweep immediately. So when they're on a payment plan or the payments where they've paid $250 down and they're paying $250 a month for credit sweep, it's not like a layaway plan. We are working with them immediately, but the credit sweep is not available immediately because of the financial implication. We would be upside down on every one of those clients. But yes, you could have someone, Ken, that's on the payment plan and they could pay it up early if they wanted to. It's 0% interest, right? There's no reason to not allow them to pay earlier, which puts money in your pocket earlier. So Trevor has a question. Yeah. So again, when someone enrolls in credit and funding, they pay the down payment. We immediately start working with them. Absolutely. But the credit sweep specifically doesn't start until the refundable setup fee is paid in full, for the reason I've said now 2 or 3 times. That's why we're discussing it today, to make sure we're all on the same page. All right, so if there's other questions on credit sweep, you can type those into the Q&A box. Another topic we had come up from one of our partners, Brian, I believe, who ironically doesn't seem to be on this morning, but Brian was asking about factoring. So we've made reference to this before, and we've had some extensive training on it, but it's been a while back. So any of you that are branches, theoretically, for every new client that you sign, you have a contract with, they owe you money, you have a receivable, you could factor that, which means get paid in advance. There are different types of factoring companies. There are different factoring companies that offer different types of factoring programs. One of the easiest to navigate is through QuickBooks. So for every client you invoice through QuickBooks, QuickBooks gives you the option to factor. So they will advance you 97 cents on the dollar. Now, you have to apply for their factoring program and be approved. And it's not actually QuickBooks doing it, it's Web Bank, but through their partnership with QuickBooks. So a number of you are doing that now, which is great. So let's just roll through practically what that means. So let's take Oscar, for example. Oscar's on the line. Good morning, Oscar. So Oscar signs up, let's say Ron. Ron's a client of Oscar's branch. So Oscar knows that he's going to get paid at least $10,000 from Ron, doesn't he? Right? Because when Ron signed up for Oscar's credit and funding, Ron promised to pay either upfront or with payments a refundable setup fee plus 10% of his, meaning Ron's capital raise, and Ron guaranteed to work with Oscar, the branch, to raise at least $100,000, and Oscar, the branch, promised to work with Ron to raise at least $100,000. So theoretically, as soon as Ron, the client, signs Oscar, the branch's agreement, Oscar could turn around and factor that agreement and get paid in advance. Now, again, there's different factoring companies, different underwriting criteria, but one that you probably should consider is QuickBooks. So you'll see it. When you go to the invoice page of QuickBooks, it'll prompt you in the top left-hand corner. I think it's get paid now or something like that. It's 3 simple words. You'll fill out a simple app, and if they approve you, they'll factor, I was going to say finance, but they'll factor 97 cents on the dollar. So literally, Oscar, the branch, could sign up Ron today. Oscar, the branch, could invoice Ron today, even though Ron doesn't owe yet, right? It's a future debt. Ron doesn't owe it yet because Ron just signed up. Ron promised to pay 10% of his capital raise, which nothing has happened on day one. But still yet, Oscar could be paid $9,700 today through factoring using the QuickBooks example. So Brian had questions about that. Unfortunately, he's again, ironically, not on training today, but I just wanted to make sure that you're thinking, you're running a business, right? Your branch is a business. And as you have contracts, those are receivables, and you can factor those receivables if you would like. I'm not saying you should or you have to, but you should be aware of that. All right, so what, the other loose end item, and then we'll open it up for open forum. When you all signed up as branches, which we're excited you did, we agreed 30-day grace period, and after that 30-day grace period, you promised to enroll at least 2 clients a week, 8 a month. And so it's great. Many of you, most of you are compliant with that. Some of you aren't. So they went through and they invoiced those of you that are not compliant and said, hey, we got options. There's actually 3 options they gave you if you're not compliant as a branch. So if you go back and look at that invoice you received, it's not mean or hateful. It says, hey, there's 3 options to resolve it. One option was to pay the license fee. The second option was to leverage the new client placement program, CPP, and get some clients so you're in compliance. Or 3, let us know what you propose to do to resolve it. So if you are one of the 50 or so branches that received the non-compliance letter over the weekend, don't worry about it. We need to correct it. We need to resolve it. And you have those 3 different options. All right, so with that, we covered a full gamut of topics, starting with access to capital. We talked a little bit about credit and funding. We talked a little bit about credit sweep. We talked a little bit about factoring. Any other questions, comments, concerns that anyone has for us right now that we need to cover on this morning's Zoom? We're almost through the end of the month. Many of you are doing really, really well. I know we are, and that's the result of what you all are doing. If there's assistance you need, let us know. Our service model is we plead with you to please schedule weekly calls. We should have weekly one-on-ones where we're reviewing your client files. And if something urgent comes up, doesn't mean we have to wait for that, but we should have a weekly call where we're reviewing every client, where they're at, what's needed. Trevor wants to talk about the handover process. And I don't know what that means, Trevor, but if you will explain that a bit more, we can talk about the handover process. Anyone else have questions, comments, concerns? The first tranche financing is working really, really well. Many of you are working with your funding coordinator. She got a little backlogged in the beginning because we had some pent-up demand, but I think we're largely through that. And so we're getting lots and lots and lots of cash offers for clients. Now, some are larger than others because, of course, it's reflective of their baseline credibility. But we're seeing a lot of offers get placed with your branch clients. So if you don't understand that, let us know. We had a training, it was last week, and we really broke down so everyone understood the 3 phases of a client relationship. Phase 1, when you're getting the initial paperwork together, the agreement, the payment, the soft pull, the PFS. Phase 2, when you're working with a funding coordinator and getting the first tranche. And then phase 3, where we're working on that larger capital raise. I think that helped a lot of you, but if you didn't view that training, that would help. Ms. Dash asked about clients getting funded on first round. Absolutely. We have a lot. The majority of clients are getting funding offers on that first round. The majority are. Now, how much they get is a reflection of them and their baseline, right? Because you and I haven't been babysitting them since they turned 18. But most people are getting cash funding offers, and they can accept or not. If they don't want to accept it, no harm, no foul. And if they want to accept it, then they have it. But yes, the majority, because remember, on that first tranche, what we call phase 2, this is where we have a consortium of about 40 different lenders that are essentially competing without any hard inquiries for your client's first tranche of funding. So there's lots of options. For people that get no offers, it's a reflection that they really do need the program, right? Because they have no borrowing capacity. So I think the biggest mistake is to assume that if a client doesn't get any offers on the first tranche, that somehow the model's broken. No, it just means that they don't have enough credibility to borrow money yet. And in fact, it means they're exactly in the right place. They need the program because if they're trying to raise capital, they need help improving their 3 Cs. But absolutely, we're getting lots and lots and lots of funding offers on the first round. If any of you have clients that are not getting funding offers, I mean, you're seeing the application, you're working as the branch, you're working with the client to get the application in. It's based upon the client's credibility, not based upon your ineffectiveness, our ineffectiveness, or the lender's unwillingness to lend. It's based upon the client's credibility. All right. Angela says, explain trade lines, please. Well, we had a training on trade lines, but in brief, a trade line means an extension of credit that's reflected on one's credit report. Could be reflected on personal or business credit, could be revolving or term. All right. Trevor says, once they are ready to move forward, how long before they're funded? Well, when you ask that question, it suggests that I've done a poor job of training you, Trevor, because people get funded when they're qualified. Well, what does that mean? They're 3 Cs. And so we had a training last week I just made reference to, Trevor. I encourage you to go back and view that. Let's go through it again. The first phase is where you're getting the client file together, the agreement, the payment, the soft pull, and the PFS. I think most of you have your arms around that. The second phase is where you're working with your funding coordinator to get their first tranche of funding. See what offers they qualify for, and that's based on their baseline credibility. Then phase 3 is less standardized. That's where you and I are picking up that client file from wherever they're at and helping them get from where they're at to where they need to be in terms of improving their 3 Cs. How long it takes someone to improve their 3 Cs depends upon their starting point, their compliance, and then how much capital are we looking to raise. So as we discussed on that training last week, Trevor, phase 3 isn't standardized. There's not simple answers. We have to look at each client's file. And that's why we need to review and have our weekly calls with each of the branches. Okay, and then Trevor's asking after phase 3 is completed. Well, phase 3 is completed once we have the client's funding completed, right? Phase 3 is where we're taking the client from where they're at to where they need to be, improving their qualifications, improving their credibility, working on their 3 Cs. And so phase 3 is concluded at the end of the client relationship when we have completed the capital raise, Trevor. Ms. Dash asks a good question. What would cause a client to be denied after pre-approval of the first round? That's a good question. So you all as branches, you're working with your client to get that 1-page app completed, right? The top part has business information that's optional. The bottom half of the page has personal information. So it's self-reported information, just basic information, their name, their address, their status of home ownership, their amount of income, self-reported credit, and so forth. So that's the data that our funding coordinator puts into the system. And based on that self-reported data is what creates the offers, pre-approvals, if you will. And so it's possible, which is what Ms. Dash is mentioning, is that someone could get a pre-approval, but then if the client actually applies for it to take that funding offer, that they end up getting declined because something comes up during the underwriting that the lender says, oh, never mind. So I guess your question, Mr. Ash, is what are examples of what could cause that? Well, first of all, and this sounds probably too obvious to even need to be said, but if the client misrepresented something, then when they go to validate it, if it doesn't match what the client said, then of course that could cause the pre-approval to close versus be fundable. Second would be if the client's credit profile, so you could have someone that has a good credit score, but they're still not fundable, right? Maybe their utilization is too high. Then we probably need to go to some specialty lenders that'll focus on paying down credit cards. Maybe their credit file is really thin. So it's in general, I think many of us have seen this, rather with automobile financing, credit card financing, or even what we do. Pre-approvals doesn't guarantee a final approval, but it just means that at first glimpse, the person appears to qualify. But there's no it's only soft inquiries, no hard inquiries for us to run people through to get the pre-approvals. And then the clients are presented the offers. Most of the clients for first round are getting multiple offers. And then the clients can decide which of those offers they're interested in, if any. They can take multiple, one or none. And then when they move from that point of having a pre-approval offer to actually accepting the offer, that's where the actual application process occurs. And it's possible that they don't get, that they lose the approval based upon what is determined. But I think the biggest issue that we got to face is we're here to help clients improve their credibility. If you all are trying to base our success on just how much they get on their first tranche, that's a horrible understanding of the value proposition. That's just where they are now. We're helping them get from there to where they need to be. So any of you that are caught up in, well, my clients didn't get good enough first tranche financing offers, that's not a reflection of you. That's not a reflection of us. It's not a reflection of the lenders. It's a reflection of the client. It's reality. And that means they need to be in your program. They need to be in credit and funding because they need help. So just keep that in mind. All right. Kim asked, is the access to capital training the same as the 4-day funding program? It is not. So some of you have met Aristotle/AJ. He met a need where some clients said, hey, I don't have 28 days to go through this. And he kind of did a Cliff Notes version. So it taps into some of the same topics, but it's not near as rigorous. It's not as complete, but it's convenient, right? If you ask someone, Kim, would you rather do this in 4 days or 4 weeks? Pretty much everyone say, well, I'll take the 4-day option. Well, there's a compromise, right? They're not getting the same depth of information, and we're not able to generate the same results. So the 4-day resource that some of you've heard about, that's fine, but no, it's not the same. It couldn't be the same because it's not as thorough. There's not enough time to build out a loan package in 4 days, unless we're just locked in a room and just knocked it out and we did nothing else. All right, well, we ran long today. Hopefully we covered some important topics that's helpful to each of you. Please, please, please be sure that you're scheduling your weekly one-on-one calls with us. Let's make sure that the clients that you have enrolled are on track, that are satisfied, that we're clear. Let's make sure also that we're on track. We need to enroll at least 2 clients a week. If you need help with clients, we got the client placement program. We can literally transfer it to you, already signed up clients. And then Kim asked how to enroll in access to capital. And that's exactly what's here in highlighted yellow. It's right here, Kim. All right, thanks, everyone. We'll see you back tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.